Hello everyone, and welcome back to part two of our Greenfoot tutorial here, where we are making our little space shooter game called Killa Krayfysh. And so at the end of the last part, we had just finished writing out this we just finished writing this piece of code here called add score, this little method called add score. And you will notice here that we made it public, okay, whereas just about everything else we do is marked as private. Now, in previous tutorials, I've shown you how different objects, they don't natively know about other objects. And so, for example, this score lives in the world here. It lives in the space world. And if we wanted any of these other objects created from these classes here to update that score counter, we were passing a reference. Okay, so we were in when we created. So if we wanted the rocket to know what the score was or have the ability to update the score, we would pass a reference when we created it. Okay, so inside these brackets here, we would pass the parameter in there of a counter type. So I'm going to show you here a different way we can do it. Okay, and that's what we have done now. Okay, we are not passing anything into the objects. Okay, I've created a publicly accessible method called add score, and that means that that objects that are created using these other classes here will be able to access this add score method and send in a number of points to update the score. So keep that in mind when we start dealing with giving out score for when we shoot the aliens and the crayfish hits us. Okay, so what we're going to be doing in this part two here is dealing with the enemies. Okay, so you'll see here that enemies, we have a subclass of actor called enemies, and then we actually have two different types of enemies that are actually subclasses of enemies, right? Now, there's a reason we do this. And the reason for that is that these different enemies are going to have common pieces of code. Okay, so if I made each of these just a subclass of actor, we would have to repeat that code amongst all of them. So what we can do here is we can just write methods in enemies, methods that will be common to any kind of enemy. We can write the methods in there, and then these will simply inherit them. Okay, we can just use inheritance that comes with object-oriented programming to cut down on the amount of code that we need. So here, okay, so in the enemies, I'm in the enemies now, so let's start doing some coding in here. So I know that one of the first things I'm going to need if I'm an enemy is I need the ability to move. Okay, so I'm going to write a little routine here called move enemy. That'll be responsible for moving the enemies. So now you can see here for the first time, you can see I've put in something different here. Normally I've used public or private, but now you can see the access method that I'm using here is called protected. So when we use protected, that means that objects created with this class or any subclass will have access to this method. Okay, so any method marked as protected is available to that class and any subclasses that are built from it. If I made it private, then those methods would not inherit. Okay, and if I made it public, that's too openly accessible. So we use protected. Okay, it's still a void method. It's not going to return anything. And we're going to say move enemy. And I want to bring into this a speed, okay, because some of these enemies are going to be moving at different speeds. Okay, the crayfish and the aliens will be moving at different speeds. So if I have one routine that handles everything, I must be able to feed the speed in for whichever particular object we're dealing with. Okay, so here's where we do this. Okay, so set location. I know that set location needs two parameters. So I'm going to get the x. Okay, now I'm changing the horizontal, so the x is what's changing, and I'm going to and I'm moving from right to left, so I must subtract speed. Okay, so that there is everything I need to be able to move an enemy. Okay. What else could I have that would be common? Well, I can tell you now, and I know this simply because I've been playing this on a piece of paper before I started writing it. I need a way to remove an enemy. Okay, so if an enemy travels all the way across the screen, gets from right, gets all the way to the left, just like we did for the bullets, we must also remove the enemies. So when they get to the left-hand side of the screen, they must disappear. Otherwise, we're going to end up with thousands of enemies just stacked up on the left-hand side of the screen. So once again, we are going to go protected, because this is a method that we want to inherit down the class hierarchy. Okay, and we're going to call this one, sorry, let me just put this in here. This will be remove enemy. So this is going to be a remove enemy. Right, so it's going to be protected. We're going to say void because it does not return us a value. It just removes an enemy for us. So I'm going to say remove enemy. Okay. So when should the enemy be removed? Okay, so we need to check its position. Okay, so we look at its x value. So if its x value is less than 2, so if it's within 2 pixels of the right-hand side of the screen. Okay, so if it's within 2 pixels of the right-hand side of the screen, we are going to use the remove object method of the world class. So remember, I'm currently as an actor, so I must say get world, so I can instantiate a world object. Okay, once I've now got a world object, I can use the remove object method that inherits in the world object. And what object do I want to remove? Well, we've seen this before. It's this. So whichever object has hit the left of the screen, that's what must be removed. Okay, so it's this. Now, okay, what's coming up now is quite interesting. You've seen me before where we overloaded constructors, where we could have more than one constructor. So in a class can have more than one constructor, and they differ in what you feed in as parameters. And so we can do exactly the same thing here. We can overload individual methods. Okay, so I'm going to have another remove enemy here. Okay, this one's going to be slightly different in that I'm going to feed in. Okay, I'm going to feed in here an integer that says points. Because there's actually 2 cases where I need to remove an enemy. Either because the enemy has got to the left-hand side of the screen and I must take him off, or the enemy has been shot or has hit my spaceship. Okay, so in other words, it's something has happened to generate some points. Okay, either I've shot an alien or the crayfish has hit the spaceship. Okay, so something has happened that I need to generate some points. And if that happens, I also need to remove the object once that collision has taken place. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now, keep a careful eye on this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to update the counter. So remember, the counter is sitting inside of the space. It's in the space object. It was created with the space class here. So I can't just say get world. I can't just say this. I can't just say get world dot add score. And watch this. If I try it, you'll see what happens. Okay, if I try and compile this, it will say to you here that it doesn't know what add score is. It cannot find the symbol add score. So you might think to yourself, well, if I come here, I'm now in the space object, in the space class. There's add score. Very clearly, it is there. So what has gone wrong? Well, what's gone wrong is this. When you call getWorld, okay, getWorld returns an object of type world, but it is not space. It's just an object of type world, okay? So we could do this, remove object getWorld, because remove object is a method of the world class, but add score is a method of the space class. We extended world, okay? So we can't just say getWorld add score, because that does not exist. So what I've got to do is this. Okay, I need to create myself a new variable, okay, and I'm just going to call it W. You could have called it Bob or George or Bill or ABC or anything you want, okay? It's just a new variable of type space, okay? And what is that? Well, it's going to be, and I'm going to put this getWorld in here first. Okay, so I'm going to return an object. Okay, so I'm returning an object, but I need to cast that object. Okay, I need to force this object that I've created to be of type space. Okay, so if your teacher has not covered casting for you in your Java before, go and look it up. It's a way that we can change things. We can say, for example, we can change an integer into a double or a floating point number, for example. So we can cast it into a different type. So I'm calling the getWorld to generate me a world object, and I'm then forcing that object to be of type space. So W is now this space object. I'm guaranteed that it's a space object, and once it's a space object, then I can use add score. Okay, and you'll see now I will not get an error. I can say add score, and I need to pass into that the number of points here that came in. Okay, so if you need to just redo this, just replay the video back a bit and just listen to the explanation again, and that will tell you exactly why we used this casting here. Okay, so that there gives us the points that we wanted. Okay, obviously if I feed negative points in, it will take points off. Okay, and once we've done the points, then we can then use the remove object method of the world class. And what object do we want to remove? Well, once again, it's this. It's the object that's hit something. Okay, so that's the one we want to remove. So what we've seen there is we have now seen what an overloaded method looks like. Okay, so that there has dealt with removing the enemy. So let us now go and make the enemies. So let's go and start with the alien. Okay, so here in the alien, we're going to have to, once again, you would need to fill in the description and the documentation at the top here yourself. Okay, so I'm just going to say declare properties, as we usually do, and my alien is going to need an integer for speed. Okay, so I declare an integer for speed for my alien. Then, as we usually do, I'm going to create my constructor here. And inside my constructor, I'm going to say public alien. And I'm going to set the speed to 2. Okay, perfect. So now what we can do is, I don't need to do anything else, because I've got generic methods that I wrote in the enemies here that will do all the rest for me. So here in the act method, I can just say move enemy and I can just put in there how fast do I want to move. Well, I want to move at speed. So whatever speed is, I want to move at speed. And move enemy, that is a method that I have inherited from enemies. So I don't have to write that for the alien. Okay, I've just inherited it. I can use it. Okay, the next thing I need to know is if I must remove an enemy. And I know there's two possibilities here. So I'm going to say, right, if is touching. Okay, so if I'm touching, so if a bullet touches me, okay, I'm the alien now. So if a bullet touches me, okay, because aliens, we can shoot aliens. So if a bullet touches me, then I want to run a remove enemy. This is, remember, I've inherited this, okay, and I want to give myself a point. Okay, so I'm going to award 1 point, then remove alien. Okay, so that's if a bullet is touching me. If a bullet is not touching me, okay, so if a bullet is not touching me, then I'm just going to say remove enemy. Okay, remember, that's not going to remove enemy. It's just going to check. It's going to check if I'm within 2 pixels of the left-hand part of the screen. So here I've either been hit by a bullet, and if I haven't been hit by a bullet, I must check if I've got to the left-hand side of the screen. If I have, it'll remove me then. Okay, so that there is exactly what we need for an alien. Okay, for a crayfish, it's pretty much the same thing. So I'm just going to go and take all this code here. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go to a crayfish. And I'm going to paste that in here. There's a couple of things we need to do to fix this. We just need to, we've still got a speed. We need the speed. Obviously, the constructor name is correct. So I must actually change that to crayfish because it has to match the name of the class. We have a much higher speed for crayfish. Okay, we'll make it 15. The other thing I want to do is if I just use it like this, then the crayfish goes from right to left, but it's facing the wrong way. So I'm just going to say set rotation, and I'm going to, what am I going to set the rotation to? Well, I'm actually going to get its rotation, what's its heading right now, and then I'm going to subtract 180 degrees from that. So whatever it is currently facing, I'm just going to take 180 off, and now it's facing the other way. Okay, so the other thing is I'm going to move enemy speed, exactly what I'm doing here. But now I'm the crayfish. So I'm not interested in whether a bullet has hit me because I'm bulletproof. Okay, that's the way my game is set up. Okay, I can't shoot a crayfish. All the crayfish can do is if it hits my spaceship, then I'm going to lose points. So I'm not checking to see if I've been hit by a bullet. I'm checking to see if I've touched the rocket. Okay, and if I have touched the rocket, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 10 points. Okay, so if a crayfish hits you, you lose 10 points. Right. So that is all the code we need for the crayfish, and that is all the code that we need for the alien. So now what we need to do is, in the enemies, okay, so we need to go into the enemies here, is we can remove them, and we can move them, but we haven't actually made them yet. Okay, so we haven't made any. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say private. Okay, this is not a protected. This is not something we're going to inherit. Okay, it's now private, so it's void, and we'll call it spawn. Okay, this is what we will use to spawn the enemies. Okay, so this will spawn the enemies for us. So here we do. We're going to say if Greenfoot get random get random number, and I'm just going to put a value of 900 in there, and we're just going to say that's equal to 33. You can make it any number, it doesn't matter. Okay, so this here will spawn crayfish. Okay, so we're throwing a random number. Remember, this is going to happen. We're going to put spawn. We're going to put spawn into the act method over here. Okay, so let's put it in there now. Okay, so spawn is going to run 60 times a second. So 60 times a second, we're going to throw a random number between 0 and 900. And if the number is 33, you could have made this any number you like. So we've got a 1 in 900 chance of spawning a crayfish every 60th of a second. And you can play with this number here, and that'll give you either more or less crayfishes. So if we are lucky enough to hit that number, then we are going to say get world, add object. I have to say get world. I can't just say add object, because I remember I'm in an actor class here, and add object is a world method. So I've got to say get world in front of it. And what am I adding? Well, I'm going to add a new crayfish. So let's run the constructor for that. Okay, so there's a new crayfish. Okay, and where do I want the crayfish to go? Well, I want it to go to get world dot get width. Okay, so that's going to put it at the right hand edge. Okay, so it's going to go to the extreme right hand edge, the width of the screen. And now we want to pick a random height. So we're going to say Greenfoot dot get random number. Okay, and this random number here is going to be get world dot get height. So it's going to check what's the maximum possible height and throw a random number of that. Okay, so that's going to throw me a crayfish. Let's compile and make sure it's right. It's not. It doesn't like, so it's FYSH. So let's compile again. Okay, clean compile. And now I'm just going to copy this piece of code here. And I'm going to then paste it in. And now I'm going to spawn aliens. Okay, so I want more aliens than I want crayfish. So I'm going to make this number much smaller. So let's say 60. Okay, so it's a random number anywhere between 1 and 60. And at this time, I'm going to spawn a new alien. And the rest of this is the same. Okay, so I'm going to have aliens that are getting spawned here. Okay, let's see. I have got pretty much one more thing to do here. Okay, and that one thing is, if I try and run now, it's not going to work. Okay, that's because here in the prepare, I'm putting the counter up and I'm putting the rocket up, and I've written everything I need to have enemies. But remember, I need the act method in enemies. Okay, the act method in enemies, that's the one that's throwing the random numbers to put the aliens and the crayfish up. In order to get the act method in enemies to run, I have to place an enemies object into the world. Okay, so I'm going to say here, add object. I'm in the space method here. I'm in the space class again. And what am I going to add? Well, I'm going to add a new enemy. Sorry, new enemies. Okay, so I'm going to generate an enemies object. And where am I going to put it? Well, it's invisible anyway, so I'm just going to put it right down at the bottom right corner. It's not visible at all anyway. I just need to have it in the, because remember, we never picked a picture for it. We got no image for it. So it just needs to live in the world just so that its act method will run. So let's compile. Let's go back to our game. Let's run this. Okay, I should start, you can see I should start getting score. Yep, you can see my score is going up. Okay, so as I hit the aliens, boom, and I lost a lot of score when the crayfish hit me. So there my game is working. Everything in here is working as I wanted it. So what you can do now is you can now obviously modify this game in many ways, okay? And I suggest give that a go. Have different types of enemies, give yourself different types of points. There must be 100 different ways that you could make this game a lot more entertaining for yourself. So I hope you've had fun building this. I will carry on building some more tutorials here as we go. Come back later on. Enjoy the rest of your day.